Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you are, and welcome to another Whiskey Festival in a Box 3.0 tasting session, and another departure, as in we are going to be tasting a whiskey liqueur, which should be quite tasty. And with us, we have the man behind the bottle, the person responsible for what you're about to taste. So I'm just going to bring him in now. Mr. Ollie Chilton, how are you?
I'm very good, Eddie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Well, thanks very much for agreeing to come on and talk about the Highland Nectar, which I'm looking forward to tasting myself. I've tasted it once or twice. I think Julie Hamilton's the pepped up version with some Islay malt as well, which you can talk about.
Yeah.
I forget what did she call it?
I've got some here just to add.
Yeah. Well, you can share those tips with us in a bit. I mean, obviously we do have a recording of you for the Black Tot, but just in case nobody's watched that yet, or they haven't watched it and they want to know a little bit about you, could you just remind us of who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. So I'm Ollie Chilton. I'm head blender at Elixir Distillers. We're an independent bottler and blender. So my main job is buying casks of whiskey and rum, looking after those casks, and then selecting for either one of our single cask ranges, or blending, or putting together for one of our labels such as Port of Skeg or Elements of Islay, and indeed also blending for Black Tot.
Sorry, I was just pouring myself some Highland Nectar. I've got it sticky. Good stuff. And so I'm going to get right into the tasting of the Highland Nectar. I mean, I must admit, I'm not up on my whiskey liqueurs. I mean, I probably haven't really drank liqueurs since I was a teenager or something. So can you describe the kind of process of blending, and what goes into it? I mean, obviously it's probably a bit of a secret recipe thing, but
yeah, we're not the best at secrets, to be completely honest, Eddie. There's a little bit of secrecy, mainly because I can't remember all the things we put in. The process of Highland Nectar has been a lengthy one. Highland Nectar was actually proposed before I started on this side of the business. So I started off at Whiskey Exchange, working for Skinner in his shop, and then I moved across to look after his casks and the blending bottling side. And even before I started, Highland Nectar had been registered as a trademark. It's an interesting name, so it dates back to the 19th century. And originally was a blend. It would have been owned by DCL or Diageo, and was left defunct. Although you can still find some of those old bottles of Highland Nectar. And Skinner loved the idea of creating a liqueur because he just thought it was very evocative. In terms of the process and what we ended up doing and the flavors we used, one of the kind of drivers was, although there are quite a lot of whiskey liqueurs, a lot of good whiskey liqueurs in the market, things that you'll know and love, like Drambuie and Bouradar and the like. Skinner always has an obsession with other categories, and one of the things he loved most was chartreuse. If you've never tried chartreuse, it is worth purchasing a bottle. It's a very herbaceous liqueur, and I think what we were looking to do was marry up those flavors. So the base of this is a 5-year-old blended Scotch whiskey aged in sherry casks, which is quite dense, quite heavy. And then what we've added to that is we tried to accentuate some flavors, so such as citrus. We've used lemon oil and kind of bitter orange to accentuate those flavors, to bring in some of the more traditional spices that people associate with whiskey liqueurs. So we used nutmeg and cinnamon, and then we kind of concentrated on more herbaceous characters and things like licorice as well, to build up this almost more medicinal side, to make it feel like it's good for you. Now, being a liqueur, it's quite heavy in sugar. Relative to others, we've actually reduced the sugar quite a bit. So it's only down to about 25%, which sounds very high, but believe me, it's less than a lot. That gives it this more viscous character, this texture. It is relatively high in ABV, so 35% ABV, but still very, very drinkable. And we as always are kind of looking to balance out things just so that it's got a continuous flavor, so that it keeps on your palate for a long time. So there's development, which I think is really key to an enjoyable drink. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just had a little taste myself there. I have tasted it before, like I say, but it surprises me every time, actually, because as a previous whiskey snob, well, a snob generally, I always put my nose up at liqueurs and things like that because it didn't seem like real drink. But it's actually very, very Moorish, isn't it? It's you can actually taste the whiskey, which is a good thing. But then, like you say, there's this kind of sweet, herbaceous, slightly buttery character as well, which is very pleasant.
I mean, obviously, I'm biased, but we spent a long time putting together, and one of the challenges is actually exactly that. So I'm not traditionally a liqueur drinker at all. Like yourself, Eddie, I can be quite snobbish when it comes to the things I love. To my detriment, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but what that does do is it creates a challenge for you to think, okay, well, how do I make something that I enjoy, while also keeping in mind that there's a traditional liqueur market, that people who buy it and they have expectations. So we spent a lot of time looking at how to balance that out, and it was quite interesting because even from some of the flavors we ended up using. So one of the flavors we've used in this that is not obvious in any way is coffee. And we'd got to the very end of the recipe, and it just felt it missed. The recipe was missing a bit of depth, and we literally sat in a room and wrote down the flavors we loved. And I'm a bit of a coffee obsessive. I need my caffeine, and I was thinking, oh, coffee gives such good depth. Maybe we should add it. So we managed to get some natural flavoring of coffee and added it, and it just adds a bit of depth. Although you can't taste it as a flavor, it just gives you body. So I found it actually really interesting as a process, creating a liqueur and trying to balance those flavors.
Okay. Now, we mentioned earlier on that being a liqueur, you maybe don't need to be quite so precious about what you do and don't add to said liqueur. And like I said, your esteemed colleague Julie Hamilton introduced a drink to me, which included the Highland Nectar, but I think with the addition of some fine peated single malt, which I think was one of yours with Port Ascaig.
It would be Port Ascaig 100 proof, and it's probably 50-50.
Yeah,
measures go.
No, I don't have any Port Ascaig to hand, actually. Well, I've got some over there, but I don't want to.
Lefroy 10 will work. There you go.
The what?
Lefroy 10 will work.
Well, I've got some Spey Fumare.
Oh, there you go.
Try a little bit of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I should say I don't think you should ever be precious about any drink. Once you've paid money for it, it's yours. As long as you enjoy it, take pleasure in what you've purchased. But I certainly found one of the most interesting things about Highland Nectar after we'd made it, not during the process. During the process, we were very much basing it around what's it like to drink neat, what's it like to drink with ice, and that was it. Though we weren't really looking at anything else. And then once we'd finished making it, I handed it over to one of my colleagues, Chanel Lecurry, who's an award-winning bartender as well, from New Zealand. And she took it away one night, and she phoned me up the next day. And she goes, "I found at least 30 different recipes for different cocktails." And she goes, "It's absolutely outstanding because it's not quite as viscous as some liqueurs, and because you've got that herbaceous nature, it lends itself to mixing. But making a rusty nail, as it's known, which is whiskey and and liqueur. With this works particularly well with the addition of smoke, and I think that again that kind of herbaceous side mixing with those more peaty notes is really interesting. It works really well, and you, unlike a lot of cocktails, you don't have to add sugar because we've already done that for you. So it does work really well as something to mix with.
So you've taken the hard work out of the cocktail making, really.
Absolutely. Why do you have to make an old fashioned? Just put one of these over ice. Done. Don't have to mix that sugar.
Indeed. Good. Okay. Now, is there anything more you can add in terms of whiskey liqueurs? Is there a move towards more whiskey liqueurs or anything like that, or is it?
I think we're probably the other way around. To be brutally honest, over the last 10 years, I've seen some truly great whiskey liqueurs go by the wayside, which it's kind of sad in a way. So, I remember Glenfiddich used to do a liqueur, and that's gone now, and Macallan had one that's gone now. And one of the reasons we launched this now is because it's funny. I think that as whiskey has expanded as a market and people have become more interested in single malt and single casks and in all the geeky stuff, which is fascinating, and it's obviously my passion, my love. To some degree, you lose maybe the purity of just making a nice drink. And certainly when I started, whiskey was a nice drink. It was something that you just had. And we had loads of whiskey liqueurs on the shelf because it was a good gateway to get people into drinking more whiskey. And at the end, I just believe that we need to sell and create and get more people into whiskey. So although there are maybe less whiskey liqueurs than there once were, it's a great opportunity to bring more people into the whiskey category. And maybe people for whom whiskey is essentially a dry drink with no sugar added is maybe a bit austere. So hopefully this will be part of that journey for people and introduce more people to Scotch whiskey.
Well, amen to that. Now, just outside of whiskey, what would be your favourite tipple? What will you be enjoying over dinner or otherwise?
So I've been thinking about this quite a bit. I think you and I were speaking the other day about things you love outside of whiskey. I've had during kind of the last 2 years, I really got into Armagnac. I find it fascinating as a category, but I find all the small houses quite interesting. So I will almost certainly have some Armagnac on Christmas Day, and then apart from that, it will probably be port. I have a beautiful bottle of Wars 1994 to drink, so that will be I'll be opening on Christmas Day.
See, I always love the idea of port, and I always find the problem is that by the time you get to port, you're already several bottles of wine, whatever else in, and it's kind of a bit of a waste.
You're just not starting early enough.
No, I think, yeah. But then, yeah. I suppose it's the association, isn't it? Port is almost just before whiskey. And then, so quite often I will skip the port and go straight to whiskey. Sometimes I skip everything and go to whiskey.
How about yourself, Eddie?
Well, on the recommendation of one of our other lovely presenters, Nathan, who you obviously know very well, I think I'm gonna get myself a nice bottle of Calvados. I think I did Armagnac last year. I'm not to say I did it to death. I'm just saying that's what I did last Christmas. And I think this year I'm going to try Calvados because I hear great things about it. Yeah. I think just at the moment it feels like a real purple patch for spirits in general. It just seems to be so much good stuff from everywhere and all different categories. So it's a really good time to try new things if that's what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've covered that very nicely. Thank you, Ollie. I'm going to wish you well, wish your family well over Christmas and the New Year. If hopefully viewers at home too, even if you're watching this after Christmas and the New Year. Thanks very much again for coming on, and thank you for the Highland Nectar. And look forward to seeing you in person at some point, if not around the Christmas period next year. But cheers.
Cheers, Eddie, and thank you very much for having us.
My pleasure. Thank you. And thanks everyone at home. Take care.